Welcome to Magic the Flavouring, the Magic the Gathering podcast, where we talk about all things Magic flavour design and lore. I'm your host, Andy Mann.
Hello, this is Nathan.
I got up in my head a little bit there. Did you hear?
Didn't even let me finish my name.
Oh, no.
That's fine.
Oh, okay.
They know who I am.
I mean, we're doing 150 something of these.
If they even do care who I am, it's fine.
Oh. Oh.
No, it's okay.
Someone must.
Yeah, I hope so. Mum, please.
Oh, there's been too much news. I've got a frog in my throat. This is a disaster.
Great start.
There's been so much Magic news recently. I kind of forgot that we could just do what we want to do. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. This episode is in part due to some Magic news that's come out.
I think it's the perfect organic kind of, hey, this little thing's come out, want to do a podcast about it, instead of being like, oh god, there's another secret layer, we need to do a podcast about it.
Yes.
Like, it's a very different verve to just being like, hey, we have to keep up with what's happening. It's like, no, what's happening is actually inspiring enough to create organic content.
Indeed. So what has happened? What's happened is in the midst of Final Fantasy.
The release of,
and
it's immediately available, like for opening.
The newest death of Standard and the Pro Tour with what was it, Monstrous Rage being like a card that like is in every single deck in the Pro Tour.
Corey Steelcutter causing issues of, hey, let's have only mirror matches in the top 8 until the final.
Yeah,
great.
Yeah, they released 2 cards from Age of Eternities, which will be released later this year. One of which was the Sienna.
Sure.
Siriana?
Something like that.
It's a ship.
Spaceship.
With a bit of EDH news that was their vehicles can be your commander now, whatever the fuck.
Yeah, just a set too late, guys. Well, technically 2 sets.
2 sets too late. And the other being a new Tezzeret.
Ooh.
Tessie Boy's back.
Exciting.
With a sexy dark steel body.
Yeah, I mean, as we probably knew was going to happen, the only other, like, some of the main key art that we got was originally him, the T-pose in the middle of space.
Oh, that's true.
Which is not, I'm not gonna lie, it's an infinitely more interesting art piece than the Planeswalker artworks.
Well, they released both arts with Planeswalker.
Which I think both are good, don't get me wrong, but that key art of him T-posing is something else.
Yeah, so. Exactly. And it's Tezzeret Cruel Captain, which is 3 colourless for a Tezzeret Planeswalker. Whenever an artifact you control enters, put a loyalty counter on Tezzeret. Well, I'm kind of skimming words now. Whenever something enters still throws me a little bit. And it's got a 0 ability, untap target artifact or creature. If it's an artifact creature, put a 1/1 counter on it. -3, that's Granola, one of Nathan's cats, having a good play. -3 ability, search your library for an artifact card with mana value 1 or less, reveal it to put it into your hand and shuffle, so go grab your Soul Ring. And then a -7, you get an emblem with, at the beginning of combat on your turn, put 3 1/1 counters on target artifact you control. If it's not a creature, it becomes a 0/0 is it robot?
Robot.
Artifact creature, for loyalty. Why is this Tezzeret interesting, Nathan?
Well, what colours is it, Andy Man?
It doesn't have.
It doesn't have colours. I mean, we could go into like a microcosm flavour episode about robots versus constructs. About yeah, I know we're not going to.
Ugh,
it's fine.
We will in the future. This is snakes all over again.
Yeah. We could go into all of that, but I mean, I think it's more interesting to think that being a mono blue planeswalker who then was a predominantly blue-black aligned after his influence from Bolas, and then there are other times he's gone back to being mono blue again. To go to be colourless for me is a big change philosophically. Like, is it, or at least the question is, why is he colourless?
Yeah.
Is it a matter of the mana that he's using, the ley lines he's connecting into, his personality, his allegiance? Because there are certain like hints to him not being completely reformed in the fact that his title is Cruel Captain.
Yeah.
When he's literally had another iteration with the word cruel in it before. So even within the card name, it doesn't seem like he's changed that much, and yet somehow he's now colourless. And I hope that it's not just because, oh, well, Khan's gone now and we need another colourless planeswalker, and he's the artifact guy, so let's just make him fulfill that role, and we're just, like, keeping all the boxes ticked. I hope it's for, like, actual story implication reasons, but it did then make me think, well, what could those implications be? And then looking at past Planeswalkers, is there something we can glean from that in terms of the reasons why Planeswalkers might change colour, times that they've done it in the past that have been successful, unsuccessful. I say all of this, you came up with that structure.
You just said, should we talk about Planeswalker colours? And I'm really bored at work at the moment, and so I put together a whole outline. So yeah, we're going to be talking about what is the reason that Planeswalker cards change their colour. Why do they print different cards of the same character, and sometimes they're one colour and sometimes another? Is it in-game? Is it because of the game itself? What the fuck's going on? When are the times it's worked? When are the times it's not worked? When are the times where we were fucking 1000% certain they should have done it, and then it turns out that they didn't change a colour? And then also we're just going to, kind of shoot the shit about Planeswalkers and the colour palette.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. The first thing I noticed when I'm going through, because all I do is open Scryfall Advanced, put Planeswalker into the type, and then scroll through all 300 odd different individual unique Planeswalker cards. So there are many that have gone through changes, but not as many that have gone through like deliberately obvious and like not drastic, but like really important definitive changes.
Yeah.
There's been less deviation of character than I'd have expected, or at least less colour changes than I would have expected. There's a lot more consistency. I mean, I think there's about, 12 or 13 that end up having multiple different iterations. Like something like it was interesting for me to see that, like, say, Chandra with her 21 iterations didn't have a single card that even went into a slightly different direction.
Yeah.
You know, not necessarily being a different colour, but at least like flexing mildly into another one, which we will see from other Planeswalkers that happens where they go, even it's like a little hint of this other aspect of Magic, they'll go, or Magecraft or whatever, they'll go, okay, well, let's add a second colour to it. Has it always been balancing in the sets? I don't know, but for 21 iterations of Chandra to not change, but to have a character like Sarkhan who's had about 4 different colour iterations, it's quite interesting to compare.
Well, if we look at, if we just kind of set a baseline then of like how often this actually happens, to kind of put some perspective on it, like you were just talking about. If you take the Gatewatch, so we have, and they are the archetypal Planeswalkers of those colours for, I would say, the majority of players today, which because they're kind of bang in the middle of Magic's history at the moment, which is kind of a wild thing to say. But like that kind of Gatewatch era kind of spans both old and new players. So if you take Jace, Chandra, Nissa, Gideon, and Liliana, firstly, you said that 21 iterations for Chandra. Who's the next most popular printed?
I'm assuming Ajani.
No, out of the Gatewatch characters specifically.
Ajani?
The original Gatewatchers, the 5.
Ajani?
He wasn't an original Gatewatcher.
Oh, I suppose that's Gideon, isn't it?
Out of the 5 I just said. Liliana's got 12 cards. Jace has got 14.
Oh, God damn it.
Then it's Nissa with 11 and Gideon, womp, he dead, with only 8. Only 8 printings. And out of all 5 of them, out of all those printings, only Nissa has had a card that's deviated from her original colours.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, fair. Which is that...
Of which there's only 2.
Now, so is that by... So let's go through those 5. If we're going to let's start with those 5 then.
Yeah.
Do any of them in your mind have had another opportunity to change their colours that you think was missed? Because in my mind, the reason why they choose those 5 Planeswalkers is because they are so representative of that particular colour. There wouldn't be much deviation, right?
Oh no,
otherwise
100%.
they wouldn't want that. It's like I don't think we'd ever see I'm surprised like we never saw a red white Gideon, but at the same time I'm sure they were like, well, we need to keep a solid mono white Planeswalker.
So I think when I was thinking about this episode and I was thinking about prepping these kinds of answers, I did notice a pattern in my answers to almost everything about like, well, what colour would you add to which Planeswalker? Because it's the same colour every time. And when I was thinking about it, I was thinking, oh, that's basic bitch shit. And that's black. There are so many times where these characters... But, so here's my... This is all based on why are they changing the colours. It's all connected. So my 2 big ones for that are Jace and Gideon. Jace is much more flim-flammy and flimsy and much more obvious. But the one where I'm like, for Gideon, I was like, that was a hugely missed opportunity, especially when you compare it to other times they've changed Planeswalker colours for narrative reasons. And that's Gideon Blackblade. Literally Gideon Blackblade, which was his War of the Spark Planeswalker. He has the Blackblade in his hand.
But the Blackblade is not a black card.
No, but it is a corrupting artifact. That's literally the story of the Blackblade.
Do you think if it was if it was printed these days, Blackblade would have black in its mana cost? Because it was obviously printed in Dominaria.
Yeah.
And that was kind of Marrow's like, oh, we need to make sure we have artifacts that have colours in them so it makes them less ubiquitous and it gives them a little bit more flavour. You know, we started seeing things like Embercleave and stuff like that.
I think, yeah, probably. I mean, it would at least have like a black activation cost. It'd be a colourless So if we talk outside the realms of Commander, if we're just talking about it as a card, it wouldn't have a black colour. It wouldn't be a black card. It would have a black equip or something. Yeah. It'd have a black equip cost is what it would have.
Similar to like Cranial Plating or something like that.
Exactly. Okay. And like, you know, there's no abilities, to be fair, on Gideon Blackblade that suggest it having a black colour identity. But Gideon at that point in the story, it's at the point of him being the most heroic, but he is compromising his morals to do so, because he is using a cursed artifact. And
he also then rides on the back of a demon, I guess. I think the thing for me against that is that I don't think Gideon's personality, no matter what he's pushing towards, ever wavered from that kind of heroic nature, at least enough for it for him to get that little tint.
But knowing what we know of his story, of the fact that he does die in that arc, and he dies by sacrificing his own life to save Liliana's, like, directly. Bolas is killing Liliana with, like, his death magic, whatever the fuck that means, and then Gideon siphons off that power into himself and corrupts and dies. It would have been I think it would have been a much more earned payoff for the character if, to do this kind of dark deed to kill Bolas, Gideon sacrifices some of his kind of
goodness,
righteousness for the sake of righteousness, and then still at the very last,
almost like a Batman,
a little bit, and still at the very last overcomes any like nature of the Black Blade that might be corrupting him to follow through. It doesn't have to assassinate his character as a bad guy. It just needs to give him some sort of like, I guess like not everything's all black and white.
Well, I guess if we take out the fact that they needed to balance the set to have at least one representative of every colour combination, both dual and mono for the War of the Sparks set. Because obviously it was the Planeswalker set, and they needed to have... And there's a lot... I think War of the Sparks is a tricky one, because it's one of those sets where many Planeswalkers that are only known for being two colours, say Arlen Cord, for example, get stripped of red to be a mono-green Planeswalker within the set because they needed a mono-green Planeswalker.
Yeah, they did that to a lot of them.
Because when you're making the uncommons, you need to fill in all of those gaps. And I think that's, out of all of the sets, or all of the representations, I think that's the one where it feels the most unrepresentative of character. And I agree, I think there's definitely something to be said for... I feel like if it was purely narrative flavor reasons, we'd have way more dual color Planeswalkers, because it would be, hey, yeah, we know the core of this character is this color. However, in this particular moment, they're feeling a little bit more like this, you know.
I mean, what?
Or they're acting a little bit more like this, or they're tapping into a little bit more like this.
But then we're getting. This is where we get really meta. I think the structure of this episode is already disintegrated because it is also linked together. I'm a human being with emotions and a full spectrum of like personality traits, both good and bad, quote unquote good and bad. Sometimes I act white, sometimes I act red. That if I'm a mage, if I'm a wizard in this world of Magic the Gathering, just because I get passionate about something or just because I act selfishly doesn't necessarily mean that I tap into ley lines of different manners, right? So this is why I think it's a little bit basic of me to be like, oh, well, when Jace is acting really selfishly in the later stories, he should have had black in his colour identity. Not least would it give away a lot of the aspects of the story. But is it the magic he's tapping into, or is it because that is fundamentally how he's representing himself in that moment? Do you know what I mean?
So let's answer this by going through... I've got... It was 13. 13 different Planeswalkers that I think are worth talking about that have had changes. And some of them, I think, touch on it's a Magic Leyline thing. There are some that I think touch on it was a personality, I just feel like this on a Friday thing. And there are others where I'm like, it's a fundamental change to their personage completely, which is why then they're a different colour. And I think it's kind of good that we start with Ajani, because I think he probably has one of the most interesting journeys. So if we're going chronologically, we have a mono-white creature, Ajani. We actually never see Ajani as a Planeswalker before the moment of his brother's death, because he becomes a Planeswalker in Sparks because of his brother's death. Yeah, that's when his Sparking Knights. The fact we know that he was obviously absolutely mono-white beforehand, and then he flips into Nakatal Avenger being the red-white version. And even though we saw Ajani Goldmane first in Lorwyn, we know that that's not Ajani in his first iteration. That's him further on in his journey. And actually, when we first meet him in the canonical timeline of Magic story, is when he's Ajani Vengeant in Alara,
right.
Shards of Alara. And then we go from that into a mono white, and with mono white fairly consistently for a fair while until we hit Theros. And then once he hits to Theros and he starts becoming more of this wizened mentor, being the first iteration of him having green in his cost. Now that shows for me, and it carries on for a fair, all the way through to being the sleeper agent. He's still green there, which is funny because I'm surprised that they didn't. And we'll get to. I'm surprised that they didn't have a black aspect that adds when Phyrexia starts getting involved. But we'll get to that a little later. He probably has the most organic mood change, right? So we always know that he's from Naya, so green, white, red, all the Naya colours anyway. So that's actually quite a nice little thing that Wizards managed to keep it, and it keeps it all within that wedge. But to show how he is all at his core about solidarity, about building the strength in others, like he's able to create avatars of himself and of other people's abilities and things like that. Like he's very much about instructing and supporting others. And then it was when he got really angry, and this is one of the few times I think that I don't mind red being the angry color, quote unquote, is that he got really angry and he lost sight of that righteousness and was, as it says, vengeful. And that's when the red comes in, and that only dipped in for that little bit of an arc before, he was humbled by the battle with Nicol Bolas, and then goes back to being, he's like, right, cool, I've got my rage out, I can see it doesn't actually really get me anywhere, maybe it's time to like chill out a little bit. But it's only then when he starts developing into his more tutory role, being the mentor role, that then the green settles in. And that is just that doesn't seem to me to be a change of magical ability or tapping into different ley lines. That's just a mood. Ajani just went through moods, he grew up, he chilled out a little bit. So that for me has nothing to do with magic per se, or like his powers or abilities, and more just to do with how his personality is affecting his colour.
It's not true of all of them, though, is it?
No, not at all. But I think it's interesting to start with Ajani, who has gone through. He's one of two planeswalkers that go through like multiple different distinct colour changes, and then not stick with them, but at least you can kind of mark points in their life and why. The snapshot of the Planeswalker isn't a snapshot of the Planeswalker for like, that kind of year. It's like, no, this is a snapshot of that Planeswalker in this very specific moment.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, we all know the colour pie is this kind of very abstract thing, and like sometimes they'll dig into it for one reason and then they'll kind of dip it out of it for another, and it isn't marked down and defined. It's just, it is interesting how when you look at sort of the game design space and where they can kind of fit these things in when they choose not to. Like, I mean, Nissa, for example, is another good example of, she's had 3 different colour combos of being mono green, black green, and blue green, right?
Sure.
And the black green Nissa of Shadow Bows, I think, was definitely more of a mood than a ley line tab. But then the Luxor, when she's on Amonkhet, is what gives her blue ley line to tap into. So she is tapping in to blue at that point.
Yeah, so this, as you say, that's exactly it. There are 2 different swings that the character goes through, and it's funny that she was originally in the very first time we ever see Nissa, she's an opponent that you can play against in like Duel of the Planeswalkers, and she's black green there too. And when we first have Nissa in the story, she has got, I think it was retconned a little bit, but she definitely has this kind of like anti anything that is an elf kind ofness about her.
Yeah, she's portrayed as being a bit xenophobic.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny that we actually get a glimpse of that when she goes back to Zendikar. She sees everything that the Eldrazi's done to it. We see she's pissed off at Nahiri for trying to meddle again in her plane, and she just wants everyone to fuck off, and she wants to do her own thing, and is being, I'm not going to say selfish, I even put it in my notes here, quote unquote selfish, because she's not being selfish for her, she's being selfish for what her opinion on the situation being right or wrong is. Which is very interesting in the same set to have a Nahiri, who is also very strong and opinionated in what she thinks is the right thing to do. But there's no black involved in her. For her, it's white edging on... Oh, good. Nice bit of bass there. So her is like that white nobility and the charge of like being the protector of Zendikar in her own right, because she did for so long, for I think it's hundreds of years or so that she's stuck in that stuck in the corner of the planet. It's funny that she goes from white with the tinge of red when she's got this really driven, almost singular idea of what is right and wrong, whereas with Nissa, because she's green, that kind of selfishness doesn't twinge into red so much, because that's almost like the primal aspect of green. It's actually the hyper-focused, narcissistic I'm right you're wrong aspect when it comes to green actually flexes into black, and it's kind of interesting to see that comparison between Nahiri and Nissa. But then, as you say, when we get to Amonkhet and she drifts back out of being black green into is there another iteration of Nissa between Zendikar Rising and Amonkhet?
that's a great question. I'm looking at it now. There's so many different ones. I mean, there was. Oh my god, is it Kaladesh? Kaladesh is before Amonkhet?
Yeah, I'm just going to look at some. I'm going to look at some dates on here. So
War of the Spark.
I was expecting to go through. Alphabetically, Andy, and you've caused me to skip. This is
alphabetically through Planeswalkers?
Yeah.
I don't have time for that. There's she's Nissa who shakes the world.
Through all of them
in War of the Spark.
Yeah, and if that was between again, so she does drip. Well, War of the Spark would have been after Amonkhet, right? Because they get handed their asses. Zendikar Rising, so it's actually the other way. So she taps into the blue before we go. Okay, right. In my mind, it was the other way around, but I guess it's because she has that black tint at the beginning of her arc. Then, yeah, as you say, just tapping into that ley line, passing the Kefnet, trial of knowledge or whatever thing that she did to tap into, and then in that moment having access to that magic. I think Nissa is probably the biggest miss in terms of she's a ley line mage. Why didn't we see her tapping into more ley lines, more world souls, and then for every plane she goes to,
picks up a new one.
She picks up a new colour.
A 5-colour Nissa for all be one.
Which would have been really cool. And she could have then had Phyrexian red, Phyrexian white, Phyrexian... she could have done a really complicated mana cost for it. And it would have been fun because then she's tapping into all of the different planes. And the reason she can go and look at them is because I've tapped into Innistrad, I've spoken to its World Soul, I've tapped into Vrid. And that would have been a really cool story beat to go, hey, I'm now actually the link of the entire multiverse. And that moment probably didn't get played to half as much as it could have. Because I don't think they were planning on leaning into that anyway. I think the biggest conceit for Planeswalkers is they want them to be easily identifiable. So they don't want to complicate having all these various different iterations that might be like, oh, why is she red in this and then black in here because they didn't pay attention to the story. It's easier for them to go, look at Elf Girl, she green. And it kind of keeps that a little bit more narrow.
I think that is definitely true for a certain era of narrative design and game design. But then if you look at another green-black Planeswalker, who is incidentally an elf, in Tyvar, Tyvar's clan are black-green elves of Kaldheim. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't necessarily make them selfish. The black comes from the fact that they are sort of they are again another xenophobic elf race.
They're more proud than anything. I think, right?
But Tyvar's manifestation of that is he's a very boastful, story-driven person, which on Kaldheim is, you can describe that as anyone.
I mean, that's literally a mechanic of the set.
Well, exactly, but the way that they then use the colour pie to say, well, how do these people do that? You have the ones who tell the stories, they're the red ones. You have the people who explore and want to tell stories that way, they're the blue ones. You have people who kind of have a community around them and kind of shared joy, those are the white ones. And then the black-green elves are, green because they're elves, but black because they're they strive for achievement. And so having Tyvar be green-black, he is one of the least selfish characters in the entire canon.
He wants his story to be the best.
He wants his story to be the best.
No one ever was.
He's proud of being an elf. He's proud of his brother and his own family. But that doesn't necessarily, in a very unblack way, come at the expense of anyone else. Mm-hmm. Which is a really interesting way to go about it.
Mm. And then let's look at another green Planeswalker that tinges into black. Garruk. Now this very much is he's the most green of the green, even greener than Vivian, even though they're trying to make Vivian the new green, which I don't understand what was wrong with Garruk. Or maybe, I don't know, Vivian tests better because she's Pokemon Master. Oh, that links to my previous joke. Oh my god, the synergy. But obviously
you can have more than one green Planeswalker.
I agree. The thing is, Vivian, I can't ever imagine picking up another colour because they've pushed her so much into being to the point of where she has triple cost green in some of her card iterations. She is so green that she's never going to flex into anything else. Now, Garruk's definitely the kind of character I could see switching more into a Gruul kind of situation, the savagery. I could have imagined, say, when the curse got stronger and stronger, instead of it just going into being black-green, which we see twice. We see him in, well, technically 3, because we see him in Garruk Relentless, where he flips, and we see him from chasing Liliana to then after the curse and being like, oh no, I've been chain veiled, guess I'm a little bit black now, which is an enchantment, right? He's been cursed with an enchantment, which then changes the fundamental colour philosophy of the character. Yeah. Which is actually, when you think about it, a really fucking powerful curse. Yeah. To have that much of a change.
The chain veil.
It's changed how, the mana you have to have access to summon this person. Mm-hmm. That's kind of crazy. And then obviously we see him in as the apex predator, and then where he's at is peak. I'd actually like to see that with a bit of red in it as well. Go full junt. Because the savagery, that extra kind of I'll just absolutely murderfy you and I don't give a fuck.
Interesting.
Because then it dials back for Cursed Huntsman, where it feels less oh, I've lost full control, and he's more I'm a little bit bad now and I don't want to be, but, I can't help it because I've got some bad in me.
I'll tell you why he's not red. This is why the redlessness of his. Do you ever stop and think sometimes, like you're just talking absolute shit?
What redlessness? Yeah.
Here's why I don't think Garrick suits having red. I think on the face of it, he's essentially Gruul, right? He's a Gruul guy. The clans would love him. Fucking.
He feels way more Gruul than Domri. Just by power level rather than maybe that's just us trying to layer it on.
How many lines of dialogue does this man have collectively in every story that's ever been written about him? I'm gonna guess about 500 words of dialogue in almost every, and he was the main character of a fucking book.
Yeah,
and I think
that's even including the comics that he's in.
Yeah. And I just think, I mean, I could be wrong. I don't know the maths on that, but that's certainly the impression he gives of me. And I think you can't have red as part of your fundamental behavior if you're like laconic. Like we went to Cowboy Land, right? If you look at cowboys who are red, they're the yeehaw cowboys. The cowboys that are black are the kind of ones that are just flipping a coin, chewing on a like toothpick in the corner, being like, "I'm quick and you're dead." Bang, it's that kind of thing. And that's Garrick. He's too chill.
Yeah, well, this is why I think I'm a little annoyed by the Vivian taking the mono green. It almost feels like Garrick he's the hermit druidy kind of guy. He's not a druid, but you know what I mean. He feels less like a berserker and more just like a nomad.
He's a woodsman.
Yeah, and it's annoying now that I don't think we're probably going to see. So it'd be nice to see what he is now, that the curse has been lifted, maybe he's lost his spark, and maybe he's just chilling as a dude now. It'd be nice just to go back to having just big, beefy bear guy,
Big green Garrick.
And I think that would then, I mean, I think he's almost the perfect iteration of a Planeswalker with his first one, of where it's just, look, I untap some lands, I make some dudes, and I give an overrun. Like, that's just green. Whereas Vivian, does a similar kind of thing, but I feel like her polymorphy aspect and things like that she does sometimes. Like her for being a mono green Planeswalker and only being green, I feel like she does way too many different things for me to understand exactly what kind of person she is.
It sounds like you have less of an interest in Garrick and more of a dislike of Vivian.
Yeah, well, she doesn't change any colours, so that's the only way I can talk about.
And yet, you crowbar her into this episode
100%,
somehow.
Yeah. Okay, so Jace, we've talked about Garrick, we've talked about Gideon. Let's talk about Jace. I like the fact that you didn't count the fact that Space Bellerin is blue-white. That doesn't.
Oh my god! Do you know what? No. Do you know what?
It doesn't count.
He didn't show up on my Scryfall search, and if that isn't the most like lazy ass fucking sentence, I didn't even Google it that hard.
I mean, do people call him Space in that set?
I don't know. He didn't show up on Jace Planeswalker.
Has he changed his actual name to Space?
Well, that makes me more mad. The fact that he does have one colour shift and it's in an unset.
Well, the thing that makes me mad is I feel like he probably should have had a colour shift set when he was the Living Guild Pact. And my concern...
But he was a bad Living Guild Pact.
I think my concern, or not my concern, but my slight aggravation with this episode is that a lot of the Planeswalkers that are one colour are going to be kept that colour because it's a nice thing to have a powerful monocolour mythic in the set, and of course that's going to be the Planeswalker. And I feel like the Living Guild Pack is a perfect example of, hey, you're literally back in Ravnica, just make him Azorius. He's taken on all the lore, the literal lore of the land he has become. So why isn't there? And obviously he's doing the best he can, a terrible job, but he's doing the best he can to be a man of the people. And there are other times that we see other Planeswalkers being, for the righteousness. There are times when Sorin, there are times where Teferi, both are doing like good, and in their mind they're trying to do good, and then the white kind of like sits in because they're more doing it with a bit of altruism. It's not just selfishness. So the fact that Jace didn't get white when we get to Ravnica, and he's adopted the Living Guild Pack, but we do get it in some random fucking unstable Infinity. I'm out in space. Slightly non-canonical. Because does that mean that has Jace already been to the edge of Eternities then? I don't know. That's like saying like, oh yeah, I've been to America. I went to that cowboy bar in Soho. Sure, yeah. I went to TGI's. I know what American bars are like. Yeah, fair. So that's one where I think it definitely should have happened. So another Planeswalker from the original 5, Liliana, that I think we missed a prime opportunity to add a second colour to. Which version?
Oh, Professor Onyx.
Thank you.
She needs to be green-black.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, even when you do the search, right, I was like, oh, it's going to be really annoying. What if they have different names? Most Planeswalkers are just their name. So what I like is the times of where you see, like, say, Liliana. It's Liliana for every one of her iterations, except for when she's Professor Onyx. So she doesn't even sit in the Scryfall section in the same block, because alphabetically they're separated. But to me, I'm like, but that alphabetical separation is almost like it shows a distinct separation in not only...
Oh, 13 Lilianas then, not 12. My bad.
Oh, I see. Shoddy research.
Sorry.
But a situation where she's then grounding herself. She's no longer thinking just about selfish things. She's then studying and reiterating back on her necromancy as a natural aspect of life and death. You know, like and I think necromancy with Witherbloom did a really good job of showing that the life and death are just part of the same cycle. Golgari does the same kind of thing. And for her not to pick up that little bit of green, again, I think was more a dictation on the set wanting another black mythic instead of having a Golgari mythic. But I think as much as even her card doesn't necessarily inform being green, they could have made her green and then made her card a little bit more, you know, hermitable. That's not a word either, but a little bit more hermy, you know, a little bit more like now she's just like a hedge witch. You know, messing out with some potions. What I've loved is her hair to be a little bit more out of sorts. You know, she becomes a little bit more Agatha.
She's got like a fucking pen.
Yeah, exactly, the pen. Yeah. That's what I'd have liked to have seen. Something a little bit more like that.
Well, no. Well, then they took her the other way and they made her even more. Is the word snatched? I feel like I'm using that wrong. Is that what the kids say?
Secretarial.
Oh,
yeah.
Professor Onyx is a stunning card. What was it? Yes. Kieran Yana artwork.
Very much so. Yes. I mean, I actually had the alternate, which I think is. I preferred the original. I think the original looks a little bit more like Hey Boys. And also you can compare it to her in her, what is it, Charmed by Death, Reigning in Death, the one from Amonkhet, where she's also...
Death's Majesty.
Death's Majesty, that's it.
A reclining Liliana is a good Liliana.
Mm-hmm. So we've talked on, that's all of the main 5, right? Gideon, Chandra, yeah, we've done all of those. Okay, cool. So let's talk about another one that's had a big psychological change. Sarkhan.
Oh, fucking hell. Have you got 2 hours to talk about the Sarkhan colours change? My God.
I've shortened it down strong enough, I think, which is red-green due to Jun's more feral and wild nature. This is the green being the bit adding to the red rather than the red adding to the green. Obviously, he's a dragon guy. Dragons are red. I know they're in all 5 colours, but let's be honest, dragons are red. And then Bolas's influence, and this won't be the only time that we'll see Bolas's influence adding black to a character, like driving him completely nutso. In the comics, you actually see that he's spooked and followed by little dragon fucking sprites of Bolas, kind of teasing him and everything. So, you know, his madness is descent into that more... I like to think of it as...
What's the card? The card? Tormenting Voice?
Yeah, exactly. What I like to think of it is that he's more of a black person now because Bolas has kept casting discard spells on him, so he's been losing his mind slowly but surely, which adds the black influence because black spells or discard cards are black spells, which I think kind of works quite nicely. And then we move back to Mono Red after he's relinquished and he becomes, Sarkhan the Masterless. No one's telling him what to do anymore, which may be a bad thing in the long scheme of things. I feel like he's fairly misguided a lot of the time, and he accidentally backdoors himself through time. Does a load of fighting. He goes on a gap year,
He goes on a gap year.
To find the Dragons. And he does, and he fully realises himself, which then allows him, because obviously the team are a clan that work with the future, with the past. One of the best stories we had was the M29 Magic M19 Kate Elliott stories of where the team very much work with seeing the past and seeing the future kind of together. They work through time, and I think that team being kind of based for that is powerful. It works to him because he has been green in the past. The blue flex was kind of interesting, but that was him in a moment of actual epiphany.
Well, he's balanced. He's chill with who he is. He's chill with his place within the realm of Tarkir. The realm? The plane.
The realm of Tarkir.
Fucking Kaldheim or something. Am I right? And I love that. I love... We'll talk about, I'm sure, another Planeswalker in a very similar path and journey to Sarkhan from a very similar plane, if not the same one. I like it when these characters fully realise the full colour palette of their clan. Mm-hmm. It's very cool. And
I think it's good to see it only in a moment because he's not blue.
No.
For that moment and in that for however long it happens before they off camera just strip it all back again.
Oh God.
I know.
Has there ever been a more mistreated character?
It's such a shame. But to have that moment of brilliance and to show that in that prime moment, and that's again a psychological thing. It wasn't necessarily the magic of Ugin because Ugin's colourless. So it's not adding that into it. It's the fact that he fully realised that kind of ethos, that way of thinking, and the teamer, and fully epitomised that teamer understanding of heritage and protecting yourself and who you are. I think that's a really good example of similar to Ajani, of where being in a different psychological space will change who you are fundamentally as a mage and as a character, and your motivation, and your inspiration. And then we strip all that back, and he goes back to mono until the day he turns into a dragon.
He does have one legendary creature card, a D-Spark legendary creature.
Souls of Flame.
He actually has two then, sorry, because he has a red-blue one.
Yeah, that's the Souls of Flame
and then he has a mono-red one.
And then the mono-red one that he's in the latest Dragonstorm set.
Is it Dragon Aspect or something?
I'm really annoyed that we didn't actually get him in that set transforming into the big Titanic dragon, which thanks for just writing it down, because a dragon that spans the horizon sounds really fucking awesome, and that would have maybe even got him back to being the only time we'd have seen him, I don't know why I'm so obsessed with this, as a Jund Planeswalker. Just make the creature on the back Jund. Fuck it, make him a dragon. Please just make him a dragon. Anyway,
Sarkhan suffers not only in the story, but also visually from being a character that when you type in their name into Scryfall without any other caveats, and you look at the range of cards they're on, he does seem a little bit silly with his dragon arms. I don't want to have a pop at him.
Yeah.
It's just why does he have dragon?
Why didn't they just reprint Form of Dragon when he literally is turning into the colossal dragon in the Dragonstorm set?
I understand a mage turning into a dragon, and in later iterations of his character, he has these scaly arms as well. I get that. I just don't know why he has two fire-breathing dragon arms.
Because it's way too much effort to become full dragon. Also, he can then fire breathe 3 times. From his mouth and then from his chimeric Hydra hands.
It's so funny.
There's
a term in Deep Space Nine within the fandom of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, which is the phrase "O'Brien must suffer," because the character of Miles O'Brien, Chief O'Brien, who came over from Next Generation into DS9, every single season, if not multiple times a season, if it's an O'Brien centric episode,
some bad shit's gonna happen to him.
He's been imprisoned multiple times.
Right.
He's lost his daughter multiple times.
Bad dad.
He's had multiple breakups with the same wife character.
Bad boyfriend.
He's been shot. He's been everything bad that can happen to a middle-aged man has happened to him. And he's the
relatable person. He's the one where everyone goes, you know what, actually, my life shit too. I believe in this guy.
It's absolutely true, because Colin Meaney, even at the time, was a relatively, and this isn't a dig at Colin Meaney, he was a relatively normal-looking, middle-aged, portly white dude. He's very basic of the basic. And he's Irish, so he's fun,
Yeah.
And it's cool. So we have this relatable kind of everyman. And he's not a commissioned officer in the show. He is he worked his way up because he's a techie. It's cool. Let's fucking throw him in jail and give him PTSD. And you're oh my god. So, and I think Sarkhan is
the same. Yeah, he's the punching bag.
Sarkhan must suffer.
It's such a shame as well, because I feel like he had such opportunity, Or at least I feel like if you're going to bring him back for in a good way. Don't bring him back just to slap him on a random 2-drop. But that's the other thing. He's so meek. He's just a 2-drop guy. He just doesn't even fully realise into the dragon thing. Oh, no,
which is mad, because in the story, he kills a dragon and eats its heart.
Yeah, and then becomes
the dragon.
A horizon-spanning Anyway, whatever. I'm over it. Sorin, nice and simple.
Yeah, he's interesting.
Because he is core. He is mono, and I think this is true of most characters. Most characters are very rarely going to be exactly both colours.
No.
I think most characters are very distinctly one colour, and then they just flex a little bit into one or another. And I think that's just because who you are at your core and what ley line you tap into as a creature, whether it's through your magic or through your allegiance, I think it's always solidly going to be one of the 5 colours of magic, just because I feel like that's a little bit more... I think it has a slightly more integrity. I feel like someone like Arlene Cord is a really good example of someone who's exactly 2 colours, because she's absolutely red and green.
Yes.
That's because half her is human and half her is wolf. And it's almost like a fusion of those 2 things, which we don't usually get with other planeswalkers. But Sorin is absolutely just a black dude, kind of pissed off at things, very much self-serving. And then he went on a little quest to be like, okay, I guess fine, I'll mop up the bullshit that I caused, thousands of years ago that might end the multiverse. I guess I'll gain some responsibility.
Do you know what? That's interesting, because I always assumed that his white aspect came from his kinship with his fellow Innistradi, because he, even as a vampire, was willing to see the bigger collective of everyone on the plane.
See, I think that when he decided, hey, I'm going to make Avacyn, I'm going to make this perfect pure white thing out from myself, and this is why I think she still came out looking like super sexy goth girl.
She had a smoky eye.
Because as much as he can tap into that mana, I don't think it's actually properly within him, which is why it creates this kind of like, a hollow construct per se, which angels all are anyway. They're all constructs of white mana. So it's interesting that he was able to do that. But I feel like every time he's on Innistrad, as much as he's trying to save his realm, he's saving his realm because he's like, I'm the only one who can do this. I'm doing it because no one else is able to, and I'm not doing it in a way that's like, hey, I hope we get rescued. It's like, well, fine, if there's this bad shit out there, I just want to get everyone out, leave it alone, leave me and my plane alone. I'm just gonna, it's mine to protect, and I'm gonna protect it for me.
So here's a question then. Here's a real colour pie question for you when it comes to Sorin and his mono black status. I think on this podcast, we're very comfortable talking about black being the selfish, spiteful colour, and that's usually in terms of how I describe it, because I'm loath to say it's evil. So the next best thing where it's like, well, it's not evil per se, but it's definitely like a bit of a dickhead, is like to say selfish and spiteful. But that isn't the only thing that black does. Black is also the colour of fear and despair. So my question is, my sort of thesis is that Sorin's blackness isn't to do with spite or selfishness. I think he's he's a fearful character.
I think he's not only fearful, I think he's also sad. I think deep down he's just an unhappy dude. And it's funny that we only ever really see him being white when he's outside of his plane, when he's the
well, no, he's
Lord of Innistrad. So his first white iteration, was on plane, because the other two were when he's Solemn Visitor over on Tarkir, and then we see him Vengeful Bloodlord on in War of the Spark. But Sorin the Mirthless and Sorin Vampire Lord are both mono black ones again, and Sorin of House Markov, he is, before he even became a Planeswalker, he was mono black. And I'm kind of annoyed that they made, when he's the Ravenous Neonate and his Flipwalker from Modern Horizons 3.
You do also have Grim Nemesis as well, which is on Innistrad, to be fair.
Where's Grim Nemesis?
That's from Shadows.
Why isn't it listed here? Is that because... Oh, it's the dual colour one, right? It's the... Oh, no. Oh, right at the top, yeah. Oh, true.
Not to throw a spanner on your thesis.
I guess it kind of, yeah. I guess... and it's interesting, because that's when Nahiri breaks out, right?
Yeah.
Because that's right next to where the Helvor was up on that peak, and the two of them have that big old battle. I guess he's still at that point up, because he's still in the arc of trying to do the Eldrazi thing, right? Because that's why he goes... So I think the white is almost him putting on this kind of like, well, I guess I have to be the one to try and help out. And I feel like that kind of altruism isn't coming from a true sense of honour. I think it's coming from a sense of entitled responsibility. And again, I think it's a personality thing rather than a magic thing. So I think if it was a magic thing, we wouldn't... I mean, and even if you think about the first iteration of him, it's 3 black. Like, it's that you very rarely get triple costs in Planeswalkers. So it really is kind of pushing down, like, that is who he is. And maybe this is before Wizards really knew what they wanted to do with him.
I sort of feel like... I mean, even the artwork for Sorin Markov...
he feels a bit more evil, right?
He definitely looks like, I'm an evil vampire. Whereas if you look at him and say Sorin Grim Nemesis, he looks more like a knight.
Yeah, he looks like just an old grizzled guy trying to do his duty. Yeah. And I guess that's the thing, is the white aspect of Sorin that it's his job rather than his personality? If sometimes he goes, right, time to go to work and be a saviour of the multiverse, and that's when he becomes mono white, and then when he goes back home, typically he's going to be like, well, you know what, I can just sit in my castle and be sad and pissed off about things, and I can go back to being mono black again. I
would definitely say yes for narrative reasons. I think the only one where that doesn't quite fit, and I think again it's for colour reasons, is for Sorin Ravenous Neonate, which is the flip side of his... Because I think in those Flipwalkers, they want to kind of show the duality.
Yeah, which I don't think he would have been... I don't think he had that nobility at that point. I think he'd still be this angry kind of like, oh my god, what fuck you. I don't think it makes sense. And I guess it's fine because he doesn't cost white mana to play. He doesn't even have a white activated ability. It just happens to be that... It's almost like the innocence of who he is on that side. He's battling with that. I don't want to be a vampire. That's why I'm angry. I never wanted to be this. And after the, several hundred years, he's kind of settled into, well, I am what I am. I can't really get away from it. And it's pissed me off and made me upset and angry about things. And then, annoyingly, also, as a planeswalker, I've now got these fucking duties and everything. So I get that mood a lot. But I think it's absolutely a personality aspect to his changing of colour rather than being a magic thing changing his colour.
Yes.
Who else is more... Teferi. So this, I think, is the opposite. I think Teferi is an Azorius... Not an Azorius mage as in from Ravnica, but he is absolutely a wielder of blue magic and white magic. I think with Teferi, the thing is...
There's a whistling. There's a wind howling.
I think for Teferi especially, as much as chronomancy is his predominant feature, I mean that's the blue side of him. Things like Teferi's moat, Teferi's protection, like he has white spells and white magic within him, and I think that's very much. It just depends in the moment. I think what is he needing to use and who is he needing to be, because you get him in more of the spark as a white mage. You get him in Innistrad. Which one was it? Midnight Hunt. Is it Midnight Hunt that he's the who slows the sunset? Yeah, that'd be Midnight Hunt because it's about the werewolves. So I think it's interesting that a lot of the times the set will probably dictate that he needs to be blue and mono blue, similar to Jace, because they need a mono blue mythic and the Planeswalker makes sense to put it as. But I think for the most part, Teferi is absolutely a white blue Planeswalker, but the magic he uses for white is so minimal, and his functionality within stories and within his magic is definitely blue. I think from a personality point of view, being the strong, like kind of like a Ajani, being that strong old mentor person who's definitely gone through the wars a few times, is definitely the person who sits there in the room and goes, "Hey guys, we've done this a fair few times. I know how to handle like a wartime situation."
Yeah.
That kind of experience, and as such leadership quality, because he's gone through it all, so often. I think automatically, but applies a whiteness to him anyway in terms of he's always wanting to do the right thing for the good of the community. You know, I'm surprised that, say, Teferi's Protection, I think truly probably should be a white-red card, because in that moment he's very selfish, not selfishly, but very emotionally going, I need to desperately protect my own plane, or my own continent, and he's doing it in a reckless fashion. And I think that would actually probably be more red than blue, because he's not properly thinking through the situation.
God, how that colour pairing would change that card's price point dramatically. Wouldn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, the fact you wouldn't just
only
get
red white gets access to that.
Yeah, which I think is kind of fine.
Yeah, it's fair in a way.
Yeah, because then your aggro decks have a little. Yeah, I think that's absolutely fine. I think having a card that's really, really powerful, being less colours, obviously automatically makes it even more powerful, even more egregious, and obviously more expensive. So yeah, I think Teferi is a good example of someone who the magic is definitely there, but it's also maybe potentially the job titling as well. Of like, in that moment, is that person needing to be a leader? Are they having to have that nobility, that selflessness to lead the charge and take the onus of this needs to be done and I'm going to be the one to do it.
Which is interesting, isn't it? Just to kind of... I kind of let you just go there and I was kind of formulating my thoughts. Talking about the different aspects of what black is, you could say the same for white, where I think with white, I think we're quite happy to talk about things like community and then self-righteousness. And it's interesting that they really took those two aspects in a different way, because when Teferi is being more arrogant in his youth and in his early years, and when he blips out half his plane, that is, I mean, you could very much argue that is a self-righteous, I'm doing my duty, fuck the rest of you thing, right? So you could almost sort of see a world where blue-white Teferi is actually younger Teferi, and it's only when he gets greater sense of wisdom does he become full blue Teferi.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, right? I mean, I think for me, the predominant card that kind of displays this most is just in the titling Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. And that titling is that thing that brings that white aspect into him.
It's a shame that every one of his cards are pig shit.
They're just quirky, annoying things to play against. I still don't own a 3-mana Teferi, and I don't think I ever want to. Who wants that? That's mean.
That is an character that is absolutely assassinated by the design of his cards.
Yeah. It turns out time magic really powerful. Time cards really powerful.
Yeah.
Tamio.
God, you really are just going down all of them, aren't you?
No, I mean we've got what, two more to talk about.
Oh, I've got one to jump in at the end. Then there we go.
I mean two more apart from obviously we'll come back around to Tezzeret again. But so Tamio starts as mono blue. She's researching. I think this is also another time where we print a character, we make them mono because we need a powerful blue mythic for the set. We'll think about their character a little bit later, because I don't think she's anything other than, and it kind of gives it away during her initial Flipwalker, Inquisitive Student. I think she should truly be blue-green at all times, but she's only researching the first time we see her. She doesn't really have any other interaction with the set. It's not until we go back to Innistrad and we see Tamio Field Researcher, which I also think is a bit of a fuck-up, because at that point you add in the green, which makes sense in the grand scheme of her character, because we're going to get to all of the other green iterations. But why the fuck she's also got white involved? Why the fuck she's a Bant Walker?
I think this is a gameplay decision, because the clue mechanics in that set, although I think clues were across everything, was very much the Bant archetype in that set. So
they're just tying her to the clues, being the research, but those in those 3 colours, then add in white as well. I guess also, is there an aspect of in this moment she feels more... So before she's just researching for her own personal needs, whereas now is the research way more about, okay, no, there's bad shit going down and I need to be helping. So is there a communal aspect of she's no longer just doing it for her, she's now doing it for the greater good? And does the greater good then add in that green-whiteness?
Yeah, Tamiyo isn't a weird one, isn't it? Because they definitely have... I mean, with the benefit of hindsight of now her story arc is closed, we've seen her entire arc and how important she became throughout the second Phyrexian invasion. Well, I guess third, technically, Phyrexian invasion.
Yeah.
Like, it is wild to think about those initial cards in Kamigawa and Shadows over Innistrad, because who the fuck was Tamiyo at those times?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
really seriously. And, like,
Didn't
why...
have great involvement.
And, like, part of the story circle, we got some, like, online fiction about them, but, like...
She was still quite nebulous. Like, she was there, she was present. I think the scroll thing was super, super powerful and really cool, but that was, like, a MacGuffin, right? So it's like, well, who's the person behind the MacGuffin? But I think at that point, they kind of wanted to go, well... If she's all about scroll magic and history and stuff, I mean, even Reki, history of Kamigawa, that's a mono green card. I think the green blue aspect, because she's interested in understanding things, but she wants to understand and preserve the history of things. Now, that to me is Simic in its most, I want to say, innocent, because otherwise Simic is just big sea monster land stuff, which
or
is quite
it becomes
egregious.
like biomechanics. And
yeah, sure, things like the Simic, yeah, exactly. And I think it's kind of interesting to see that you obviously get. When she flips in her Inquisitive Student, she flips into a green-blue mage, which is, I'm now going to go and travel all the various multiverse of interesting natural places and then just document all the phenomenon of it. Like, that kind of thing makes sense as a green-blue. I think it's interesting that the completed Sage doesn't introduce black. And it's the first time we've kind of talked about it, but obviously the Phyrexianization of a lot of these walkers, Luca gains green.
Yeah.
Because I guess he's attached to a beast, and the beast is green and he's red. And...
Well, I think so. I've avoided talking about the Phyrexian walkers with black in them for much the same reason I laid out early on. Whereas, like, I think it's very easy to be like Phyrexian's black, whereas actually the whole point of the new Phyrexian
was that every
lords,
colour can have.
Yeah, it's not about being black. It's not about sort of this York mothification of everything. They've moved past that.
Yeah. If anything, it's actually just being anti-red, because red is the colour of
creativity
and independence.
Independence,
and that's the thing that Phyrexia.
I mean, you could very easily. Phyrexian Jace could have been black. Very easily.
I think Nahiri is probably the most one that you could have argued with, because again, that selfish directive that she had.
Nahiri in general, I think, is not to kind of take away from Tamiyo, but just to kind of segue into Nahiri, because we haven't spoken about her yet really at all. Is that I think she's one that is rife for having black in the colour identity. However, the reason she's not one of my missed opportunity planeswalkers is because white does that job so well with, I'm just going to call it what it is, fascism.
Yeah.
Like, the core, the ancient core, are a pseudo-fascist society, how they treat Zendikar. So having Nahiri have white in her colour identity rather than black. You could argue that it's a selfish endeavour, because even the core of the plane don't necessarily want what she wants anymore, blah, blah, blah. But she is doing it specifically for societal reasons, not for personal gain.
I also don't think you can take away white when, as a core, that is like the fundamental. That's her actual bricks and mortar.
Yeah.
She is a lithomancer.
Yeah.
That's white, and it's never not going to be white.
So that's why I think Nahiri
does it. Yeah, and I think you're right. I think just adding black to, I think the one it doesn't make sense to. I think we should have got the 5-color Nissa, where she's now tapping fully into the ley lines of all the fucking multiverse, and that would have been a really interesting story beat. But I don't think they're. I think Wizards in general undercook a little bit their focus on the colours of Planeswalkers. It very much feels like, and I think it's good that they've now dialed it back, because it's going to be less obvious. But it very much felt all the time that it was like, hey, we need to balance the colours and make sure we have the right colours of Planeswalkers in all of the standard environments and all of the sets. So every year you need to make sure of like, hey, we haven't had a Green Walker in a while, let's make sure we have a Green Walker in the set. And I think that's indicative, or at least a symptom of why we end up with monocolour walkers a lot of the time, or not seeing the slight flexes we otherwise could.
Which I think is a shame, actually. I think I would push back on that personally, because when they started introducing more dual color planeswalkers, in the sense of, so like if we look at a post War of the Spark Gatewatch world. What am I trying to say here? There was a version of the Gatewatch where it had moved away from the core 5 mono Planeswalkers, and they'd started bringing in other Planeswalkers, like Ajani, Kaya, things like that, where the main sort of Scooby Gang of Planeswalkers that we were following around at a certain point had such a mishmash of different colour identities that it seemed not to matter. Oh, okay, actually, on balance, there's maybe 80% black walkers here, but some of them are also white and green, and then that guy's mono red one, and whatever the fuck it is. And it became much more less about colour balance, like this fucking, light side, dark side thing, and more just about these are the characters, and Magic is a complicated game. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I for a gameplay thing, 100%, like, having balance is good. But I think narratively, you're sort of just giving in to, like, paint by numbers.
I agree. And this is why I think it's good to dial back and only have, like, maybe one or two a set, because at that point you can decide that the character is those colours because of who they are in that moment, rather than having to go, hey, we need to kind of pigeonhole them in, and then we need to lose some bits and some pieces off them, and you get a stilted version of the character.
I mean, you had Kaya, Tyvar, and Kaito all floating around each other all at once.
All were nebulous. I mean, I think actually Kaya's most interesting for being a Black Walker, because I don't see true white or true black in her, which means she's the perfect Orzhov Walker.
I also think she's essentially a White Walker who has such trauma from her home plane dying that she has this kind of black fear kind of within her.
And I also think from the fact she's an assassin, which is very much a black thing, she's now becoming a guild
leader. You forget she's literally an assassin. Oh, just because they're spirits. Like, no.
And then you've got the white aspect because she ended up getting more and more responsibilities. So it's almost like her personality is white with a tinge of black, but her job role and who she needs to be is black with a touch of white, which is why I think she's the perfect, you're right down the middle kind of character. Very, very quickly, just because it's a nice comparison. Tibalt, mono red for 2 iterations, and then when he starts getting nefarious and starts having dastardly plans and becomes Valky, he then gains black to his.
I think that's great. I'm glad you mentioned Tibalt, because the Valky card, obviously on the front face, Valky's a black.
Just black.
Is it just black?
Just mono black. Yeah.
Have I made this up? Was there any blue Tibalt? I've made that up then. I don't know what I'm talking about.
That's okay.
I'll sign off this podcast and give you all the passwords to all the logins.
But for me, it's interesting because red being cruel for cruelty's sake, you'd automatically assume would be a black thing, but it's not. Because Tibalt is the cruelest of the cruel. He's the most vindictive, and he's just hurting people for the sake of watching to see them hurt. And yet he's mono red. Yeah. And it's not until he starts being a little bit smarter and having a grander scheme that he starts to gain the black aspect to his character. Because that duplicity doesn't normally fall into red, because red isn't trying to hide what it is. That kind of obfuscation of his character, that blackness is kind of interesting to add to his colour identity.
Yeah. It's almost like, I mean, to say black isn't playful is maybe I'm going to run a crop of 10...
There's literally a mono black card called Deadly Rollick.
Yes, I know. That's exactly the card I thought of in my head.
Oh, really?
Right?
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah.
Me too.
I'm running afoul of the fact that there are 20,000 Magic cards, right? Whatever the fuck it is. Sure. Now. But I think red is a far more playful colour in its intention than black is a lot of the time. And the Devils of Innistrad are the kind of mischievous, like, everything is about indulgence of like play and cruelty.
It's a little bit more Rakdos, but that's the funny thing, right? Because Rakdos as a clan is very much black-red, but they avoided that with Tibalt.
Tibalt's from Innistrad as well, it must be said, and he is a devil. And you're right, the black aspect is because when he was a red walker, he wasn't necessarily there to be like out-and-out power grab. He was there because he was cruel and he enjoyed it. It was his passion. Whereas when he's black, it's almost like at this point he's like, no, I'm doing this for a purpose. I want to start raising my station.
I imagine he actually gets annoyed at the fact he has to follow the plan, and he's like, I can't just go out and poke people with a poker. I can't burn people. I also think you hit the nail on the head because he is a devil. He is half man, half devil. Like, he's a mix of both, and devils are red.
Yeah.
That's at his core, his bricks and mortar, he is a red walker, and it's only when he needs to have a plan put together.
Yeah.
So the flip side to this, and why I wanted to bring it up, is because Obnixilis are predominantly mono black. Not only because he's of his absolute cruelty and his warmongery, to the point of where he planeswalked out of depression because there was no more world to burn and conquer. Gets red when he becomes the adversary and becomes a kingpin. So when he starts planning and actually having to do and get involved with the politics of Capenna, he gains the red aspect to his mono blackness. But when Tybalt needed to adapt and have nefarious plans to his redness, it added the black. So is as much as we have multiple schema cards that are actually Dimir, is the colour of scheming actually Rakdos by definition of these two characters and how their colour identity works? Because otherwise I don't understand why the red aspect of Nixilis comes in.
It's short-term game. It's cutting your nose off to spite your face for a short-term fix.
Because he didn't lead either the bang bang hammer ones or the painting stabby ones, right?
No. Well,
he led his own separate one, right?
He did, but he recruited mainly from the Maestros. Yeah. That's the thing.
That's because he kills Xander, right? And murder happens.
Yeah, all that kind of shit.
But he doesn't actually take over that clan.
No. He has. He's the whole. The way they got away with not having a law and order aspect to that plane is because the plane works because the 5 families respect each other a certain amount, and then there's new guys upsetting the balance, and it's like we have to have a meeting of the 5 families, and that's the kind of trope they're going with. I think if you're looking at blue-black in terms of scheming, blue-black, generally speaking, obviously there's exceptions, is a long-term plan colour. They're a colour pair that have knowledge and a certain amount of wisdom to subtly pull the strings of the world around them to do what they want to be doing.
I know what the words you're looking for is, or the word that encapsulates this: patience.
Patience.
They have patience.
Both Tybalt being a devil and Obnixilis being a demon, funnily enough, these two different tropes which, kind of go across fantasy. They're not patient. Maybe Obnixilis to a degree, but that's only because I think he has maybe a greater weight
He's
of...
also lived a lot longer, so he has much less...
But he wants it now.
Yes.
He wants to be able to conquer now. He doesn't wait for Capenna to eat itself. No. He goes in and, fuck shit up.
He gets both Tybalt and Obnixilis get their hands dirty.
Yeah.
They want to go in and get involved. As you say, they don't scheme from the shadows. They're the one at the front doing the stabby stab and walking over their shoulder going, hey, where's the rest of my gang?
So I think to your point, I think Tybalt is an impatient... trickster who suddenly has to fucking put some actual grit behind what he's doing, whereas Obnixilis is all about power grab and all about selfish gain until the point where he can't do it anymore and he starts to get a bit restless, and so he starts poking the bear a bit more than he should.
Yeah, sure.
And I think that's where we go.
Cool. So I've got one last one before we figure out what the fuck's happening with Tezzeret, and that's one conceit to the Phyrexia doesn't make things more black, and that's Vraska. Because she is, apart from one iteration in a dual deck situation where she's mono black.
From the first time we go to Ixalan. I had that Planeswalker deck.
So apart from that, she's black green in all of her iterations, which I find curious because as much as she's not only from the Golgari and eventually Queen of the Golgari, as an assassin predominantly or going to be mostly black aligned, I don't see the green of her as much as I think that they want me to. I look at the greenness of her, I'm like, yeah, of course you're from the Golgari, but as an individual character, take her out of that and put her anywhere else. I'm like, I don't understand why you're green. I don't understand why, and when she's going through her pirate phase, why she's still green. I mean, apart from the poisons within her and being adding that to her assassin aspect, fine. But she doesn't give off, as other characters have when they add green to their characters. Look at Tamio, for example, all about trying to keep the natural order of things and preserve history. And you've got Garruk and Vivian also having that natural kind of touch to them, being nature mages, either by creatures or by the land itself. Even Nissa. I don't see that with Vraska, outside of her being of the Golgari. And I think that's maybe one of the few times that I feel like it's a portrayal of you're pigeonholing the character into a clan, rather than pigeonhole him into a monocolour.
But I think that is the reason. And I don't see that as a negative. I think that's exactly it. What's the Golgari philosophy with green and black?
Life and death.
Life and death. And Vraska, in everything she's ever done, completely encapsulates that philosophy. When she's captain of the Belligerent, something that's insanely dangerous, and her crewmates die every 5 seconds, but she still cares about them, and that's the pirate code. I mean, in the world of Magic the Gathering,
the pirate code is green aligned.
So the pirates of Penzance and also of Ixalan. Thank you. I knew I'd get there eventually. They're Grixis coloured, right? And actually, they followed that trope with pirates and other planes as well. Which is always why it's so fucking confusing whenever they print pirates in other sets and other settings. I think their philosophy very much is, it's like, guts and glory, go for it. You got to make the sort of, got to make that bread. And if it means you got to like fucking jump off a boat to do it, that's fine. That's very much the Golgari way of going, like, you can only live if there's death, and death is just a natural part of living. So, like, you've got to have that kind of spirit of throwing yourself into it,
Sure.
I think it would have been weird if she was Jund.
Yeah.
She's certainly
I feel like
not
if you're going to
Gruul.
gain the red, then you need to lose the green, because I think that for her, those two philosophies would be opposed.
Exactly. And I kind of feel like she is so Golgari. She is completely Golgari. She's an assassin who deals out death every single day that she's alive, sometimes to get paid for it. And she's also the person who likes to drink tea and read books and have the finer, quieter moments.
And
of
I
life.
guess we see the softness of her and Jace's relationship compared to when Liliana and Jace were, canoodling. Liliana never felt anything other than mono black. And I guess it's interesting what you say is like, look, she is, and who she is Golgari. And it's only when Phyrexia takes her over that then that green goes, bye-bye, you're not actually of the Golgari anymore, you're now of us.
There's no life aspect, it is only the death aspect.
Which is why I'm surprised they allowed, because I think as much as red is like the conceit and the antithesis to Phyrexian ideology in new Phyrexia, with her breast being the one who goes, hey, let them stay, and being the one who betrays Elish in the Orb-1 narrative. I think green is probably the only reason Vorinclex isn't more of a thorn in Elishnon's side is because he's just so, big stompy, want to make things that kill things better. Otherwise I think Nissa doesn't work as being a mono green, because I feel like green and Phyrexia kind of go against each other because it's synthetic versus nature. And even though I know their flesh is metal and their metal is flesh, and that's kind of what the blink moths and then so the ink moths did, and it kind of then it bastardized nature anyway. There's something about it where it makes sense to me for Vraska to lose her blackness, but it doesn't make sense for me still for Nissa to be mono green, even if it is green, Phyrexian green.
Yeah.
That story beat, I think, is them trying to say it's really hard for Phyrexia to take over green entirely, but it takes two lots of Phyrexian green to get Nissa in even earlier.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose for Vorinclex as a character specifically, it's about the survival of the fittest, isn't it? So
to the very extreme.
So so if that means that you incorporate the metal into your flesh, and that everything is prey. So if you're the ultimate predator, how do you get to that point? I think it works quite well. Certainly works a lot nicer, and it's actually a much more terrifying prospect that Phyrexia can conquer green, but it can't necessarily fully conquer red. Like that's actually that's much more poetic,
because it shows that they can beat strength of body, but they can't beat strength of mind.
Yeah, strength of spirit. Yeah,
every now and again. Oh, that was hollow. Every now and again, I feel like we're quite profound anymore. So
almost one more from me.
Okay, sure.
Narset.
Oh, okay, interesting. Yeah, because she had
3 Planeswalker cards.
And she adds red in and then loses 2 different colours and just becomes mono blue.
She starts off blue-white as... hang on. Why am I...
Transcendent.
Yeah, Narset. Narset. Is it just Transcendent,
I think
isn't
it's
it?
just Transcendent.
Yeah. So Narset Transcendent from Dragons of Tarkir. So this is Narset when... She has a legendary creature card to start with, which is full Jeskai, which is Narset Enlightened Master, because that is the timeline where clans are still running the
creature. Yeah.
She's actually a rare instance where we get the legendary creature before the Planeswalker, which is obviously now we've reversed that with all the spark losses.
Yeah.
It's very rare, and I think
we typically don't see, because we don't have multiple, it's because we don't have block Sandy, so we can't get, hey, here's the character before the big thing happens. We just get, the big thing's already happened, here's the Planeswalker.
Or we don't see, it's much more interesting when the Planeswalkers are Planeswalkers, was the theory at the time, I think. So she has the full Jeskai when she's a creature, and then when we see her in clans, she becomes a Planeswalker because her spark ignites with the weight of the knowledge that the timeline she's in wasn't the original timeline, which I've always had a weird... I mean, timeline stuff is nonsense anyway.
Yeah.
But surely if another timeline exists, that timeline can't be an original or a copy because they're both concurrent. They both have the same length of time.
Timey-wimey.
Within their line.
Wibbly-wobbly.
Whatever. She understands that wasn't necessarily the original way things were meant to be, but she doesn't have the red yet because in that moment she is still only part of the Ojutai and only has the blue.
The way I look at it is that it was humbling to her. So that red, that I mean, the fact, obviously, again, the conceit being that, of course, she had to be red, white, blue. She was the mythic legend of the Jeskai in that set, so you had to have them be all 3 colours because the Jeskai are all 3 colours. I don't think as a character she is that red.
No. But she was the master of the Jeskai,
and she had to have all three colors. So when she did finally transcend into the Planeswalker and kind of almost because I think once you become a Planeswalker and you realize you can be one with the multiverse, you kind of lose your personal identity to your plane, or at least it's a massive character question of like, how bound are you to this place that you're no longer bound to?
Yes, but there is also an aspect for Narset specifically where the Enlightened Master card was in the timeline where she had access to the full Jeskai way, whereas Narset Transcendent was in the timeline where she was only taught by Ojutai, who took the red out of that thing.
So it's actually that's an allegiance stipulation rather than a magic.
She didn't have the knowledge of how to do the red stuff.
Sure.
We then see her in War of the Spark, Narset Parabales.
The same thing, where it stripped back all the colours to make
mono blue,
fit it into an uncommon slot.
Whatever. And then which
arguably is the most powerful and ridiculous iteration.
Yes, I think I traded a foil Narset Parabales to one of the old owners of our old games shop for a Shockland of some description. Might have been a Stomping Grounds. Yeah, whatever. Shockland's coming back, by the way.
Yeah, they are.
We then see a Narset of the Ancient Way. Again, another incredibly powerful Planeswalker.
Indeed.
From Ikoria, where she's back to having all three colours. Because she's now mastered that red.
So do you think... So obviously we could argue that just because obviously you've got to strip back all the colours that don't make sense. And I think at her core she is mono. She is blue. Because I think the core of Jeskai, if we say it's one core colour and two that sit on the either side of it, is the blue.
She's very cerebral.
It's the blue can.
Yeah. Even for a Jeskai, she's very cerebral.
And we know that when she's there, she's out there gaining knowledge and stuff and trying to... So it's almost like, as you say, she's then picking up all the back... And I don't think War of the Spark is a great indication of who she is as a person.
It wasn't for any of them.
So I think, if anything, it kind of shows that, yeah, she was always Azorius. Well, she was always a solidly blue. Then, as a Planeswalker, Azorius, and then... as you say, picks back up all of the knowledge to be able to have that well-rounded aspect to her character, because she's back to being Jeskai in Dragonstorm
in
as
her
well.
Next 3 creature cards, because she's had 3 creature cards since Ikoria.
That's kind of insane, isn't it?
She's Jeskai in all of them.
Yeah,
and I think it's
that shows consistency.
Yeah, and I just think it's not a mind-bending, like, format-breaking way of doing the colour pie for Planeswalkers. I think it is just a very neat. If you had to pick of like, this is how you tell a story with the colour pie, I think Narset's a really good place to start. There is also the little quirk of Narset of the Ancient Way, her artwork by Younghae Choi, where one of the first times we see her is like a slightly older lady as well, which also gave birth a lot of theories of there being multiple Narsets.
All I see in that picture is that she's very flexible.
She's doing a crane kick.
Oh yeah.
But she in the framing of the card. I'm going to move past that. It looks like you could argue she's kicking the white pip.
Yeah, right. That's so cool. Yeah, get out of here.
So she's like, you could argue.
Is it now, bitches?
You could argue that she's trying to be Is it in that
That's
moment.
kind of funny. I own this card. I've never seen that.
At the time, a lot of people noticed it
That's
being
so
like what they're trying to say.
Yeah, get out of here, White. That's so funny.
So there's Narset. Narset's easily one of my favourite characters in all of Magic, and all of her cards are awesome.
Okay, so Andy, with all of that knowledge, with that grand discourse, let's tackle Mr. Tezzeret himself. Someone who has probably gone through as much, if not more, in terms of character progression and arcing as someone like Sarkhan, for example. Let me get down to him. Tezzy boy. Oh, I was already on the right page.
Just as you're looking for that, just a very small shout out to Ren, which has gone from being red-green to green-green.
Yeah, I'm surprised that... I mean, so the thing that she does that I think is that I wanted from Nissa is that she has the ability to make all of your lands tap for any colour in a latest iteration, which is for me the moment where she taps into
all the
World Trade and then all the ley lines. I think the thing about Ren is I would like to see, we've seen a 6, just the card by itself 6. I want to see a card by itself Ren. I know she can't survive for very long without a host. But in the same way we got Grist in like fetal form before it became Planeswalker form, I would like to see Ren and see, is she like, say, a Ren, like a nymph of Grove of the Burn Willows? Sure. Is she a red character aligned naturally before the whole sparking thing happened? Because obviously she has the fire within her, because her fucking whole forest was set on fire, and then she took it within her, and that's when the Planeswalker spark happened, and then the fire now lives eternally within her, and then that's why she needs the host to feed off of their strength, and essentially have like an exhaust pipe for her engine that's going on within her. Is it just because that Red and 6 was when she like first touched 6, and she looks quite young. Not only her, but 6 itself looks quite juvenile. In how grown it is, and so I'm interested to think is it just because it's early on and she's still trying to hold back that fire within her belly, rather than being herself a green? Is she a green creature with red magic within her, which then makes her green red, or is she automatically green red because of where she came from? I don't know.
A Ren card on its own would be a 0/1 black creature with Decayed.
Oh, poor Ren. Poor Ren. I mean,
vanishing. It would have vanishing too.
A red creature would just be a 0/1 plant because that's all she is right now, right?
Oh,
she's just a little seedling. She did the Groot thing. Anyway, right, I found Tezzeret. So
did you know there was 2 printings of Tezzeret the Seeker, like 2 different artworks?
Yeah, because there's the dual thingy.
Yeah, the Igor Kyriak art.
Tezzeret. I'm just going to get it by himself so I can do a release date thing because that actually makes it much easier. Auto no.
I still remember opening a Tezzeret the Schema from a Japanese booster of Aether Revolt when I was in Japan. That I bought when I was in Japan. I bought a Aether Revolt and a Kaladesh, and I got a Japanese version of Cataclysmic Gearhulk, which is the worst card to have in a language that you can't read.
Because it's like, what exactly does that do?
It's like Tragic Arrow. I don't know what that does. And then Tezzeret, which again, being a Planeswalker, is like impossible.
yeah. There are certain cards that the one that I have is one from from Strixhaven, and it's the one that has Spellcraft, and you make a 1/1 pest. And I've got it in, you know, it has like 3 lines of text, and you're like, oh man, all of these things together make it really good. But because I can't remember what they are, I'm never going to put it in a deck, because why the fuck would I get such a complicated card in a language that I don't read?
Oh, there's also Sexy Tezzeret the Seeker from the Vault, or whatever the Master Edition thing was, Masterpiece.
Oh, there is. To be fair, there's also Tezzeret in an Ethereum hat. No way, from the Secret Lair drop. Oh, that's hilarious. So there's been 2 Secret Lair drops. One from the artist from Metal Gear Solid.
Yes.
And then one from the when everyone had a hat on them. He's been reprinted a fair few times actually. He's very strong.
And then Kev Walker, Agent of Blood. This is bad podcasting.
Yeah. So we're just looking at pictures and talking about them. Fantastic. Anyway, right. So Tezzeret. Starts off mono blue, Tezzeret the Seeker, all the way back in his pre-Infinite Consortium days back on Alara. He is actually of Esper, unlike any of the other Planeswalkers that went to... because Elspeth is from Capenna. Ajani... Oh no, Ajani's also from Alara. That's fine, okay. I was just thinking like all of them, he's 9, yeah, absolutely. So we get him as a mono blue. The next time we see him is as Agent of Bolas, where he's been recruited under Bolas to go and infiltrate New Phyrexia. And then we see him as the Schemer when he's off trying to steal the Planar Bridge for Bolas. And then we see him as Master of Metal in the alternate dual decky kind of one.
Aether Revolt, yeah.
Then we get him is Mono Blue again in Artifice Master and Cruel Machinist. The Cruel Machinist is another dual deck, like kind of single kind of thing. They did this. This is one of the things I don't like. Is them putting
all of the Planeswalker decks,
because it just kind of gives them just another simplified version, which kind of dilutes
a bad version.
Yeah, it basically dilutes not only in terms of card quality playing wise, but it dilutes the character from a story narrative point of view as well, I believe. But you also saw him then in M19 as Artifice Master. I think this is post Bolas, so he's lost that aspect, that influence of him. Even though, oh wait, does that happen after Master? No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. So interesting, because Artifice Master, I think, basically strips back the black element, even though I don't think it should. It must probably again because it's from a core set, and the core set's wanted to be nice and simple. Planeswalkers are only going to be monocolor, but because we then see him as Tezzeret, Master of the Bridge, during War of the Spark. He's the Biobox Prome. He keeps the black aspect of him, and it's not until we get to post Bolas where he's working again with Phyrexia, but for I guess his own selfish reasons, which doesn't still give him blackness. But we see him in Neo Dynasty with Tezzeret Betrayer of Flesh as Mono Blue again.
That's a great name as well.
Betrayer of Flesh. The thing that annoys me, right, is he's got 2 names that both. He's got Tezzeret the Seeker, Tezzeret the Schemer. You know, and then he's also got Cruel Machinist and Cruel Captain. Yeah. So he's got 2 lots of reiterated names, which kind of pisses me off a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, they're all very much of a muchness. I mean, Master of Metal, Machinist, Artificer, like, whatever.
So my question here is, obviously, the influence of Bolas and then that creating that singular drive in him to not only follow the schemes of Bolas, but also to do it in a way that allows him to gain his freedom, which is also something he then did with Phyrexia, of where he was always like, yeah, Elish, don't worry, I'll help you now, but also I want something out of it. That didn't dictate him to have black in his mana cost, even though his scheming with Bolas did. And my question is it because Bolas was more in his head? Similar to how Sarkhan had Bolas more in his head, that gave him that black quality. And even though he's being selfish, because even when he's the original Tezzeret the Schemer, Tezzeret the Seeker, even his original art, his original printing, he was being fairly nefarious on Esper anyway.
Well, that's during Agents of Artifice era,
exactly,
isn't it?
And all of that, which gets confusing canon-wise, because there are certain books that aren't considered.
They're sort of pseudo-canon, aren't they?
Yeah. So my question is the blackness only because of Bolas and his singular directive when he's helping the Phyrexians doesn't mean that he needs to have black within his mana cost? Because as you say, Phyrexia isn't specifically adding black to things.
So I think this goes back to a point I made earlier, which is about kind of fear and about having a situation in which you are maybe you're not loving it, because like no one who has worked for Bolas has enjoyed it.
No,
I don't mean that in a flippant way. There doesn't seem to be any willing agents of Bolas. They all seem to be like tricked.
Well, he won't ever consider anyone to be equal to him, so you would never feel like the relationship is a relationship of equality.
Very true. Whereas I think with his relationship with the Phyrexians, as much as obviously he's not an idiot and he knows the Phyrexians are probably going to be eating everything,
probably actually thinks he's the smarter one.
Especially when he's working with Jin Cataxias, at no point in those stories do you feel like he's kind of
in active danger or anything like that.
He thinks he's like a colleague, like an esteemed equal.
Yeah, the hierarchy of power has him definitely sitting almost equal.
And he wants the dark steel body from them.
Yeah,
he's
you even know, I think, throughout the story that he's going to get what he wants, because Tezzeret always somehow, unfortunately, ends up in getting what he wants, even if it's in a bad situation.
Yeah, I think it's very easy to think of Tezzeret as being kind of like the star scream to whoever else is Megatron, but he's actually far more resilient than that.
Exactly, and I think so if we're talking personality wise, we know he's a smart, schemy kind of guy, which is the blue thing. Obviously, as an artificer, like an artifacty dude, that's also blue because we know that Artifice sits within blue and within red. And this was kind of a bit pre-red being the welders, you know?
Yeah, he's not a welder, is he?
No,
he's an artificer.
He can use magic which is why I have a question about the robot thing, because robot's supposed to be specifically away from magic, but he magicifies and animates things, which should make it a construct, not a robot, which is why I think there's a conceit there. And also, we haven't talked about the fact that his card doesn't have indestructible, even though he's got a dark steel body. And I think that's mostly because it would be confusing to players that just because he's indestructible doesn't mean he can't lose the loyalty counters and leave you anyway.
Yeah, there are cards that say destroy target Planeswalker, aren't there?
Yeah. Right. It feels like they'd have to add it in just
where would you put that?
Right, and there's already you've already made his ultimate 5 lines of text, even though he has a static as well.
He has a static ability as well,
insane. So my question to you now is then, even with the name Cruel Captain, when the last time we had Cruel in the name, it was a blue-black card. How can we... Oh no, it was actually mono-blue, which is interesting. Both of his iterations that have the word cruel in it, neither of which have black involved. So we're not talking... So the cruelness of him doesn't come from the influence of Bolas. The cruelness comes from his own... I don't care about you, I only care about me, which somehow doesn't flex him into black anyway. So are we mostly down to his coloration tends to come from the magical influence of him as well as vibe? Because if his character is the cruel captain, and yet he's entirely colourless, and it's not just because we need to fulfill another colourless walker because Khan's no longer a walker anymore, how can we... is it now that he's going to be devoid of any allegiance, and he's cruel not in the fact that he's actively cruel, he's cruel in the fact that he's passively cruel. He just doesn't give a fuck anymore.
Is it?
He's not emotional in any way, shape or form. Now he's got his dark steel, it's almost chilled him out, he knows he's good, and he's just like, you know what, I'm no longer out for just myself, I'm out for no one.
Well, this is maybe a bit of story conjecture. I know as we speak, actually, the stories are coming out.
Because we haven't seen him in the story yet, right?
No. Is it much more metaphysical than that, where he is still who he is, but perhaps his dark steel body has cut him off from ley lines?
Or is he in an environment where there aren't ley lines?
Or do you think the space environment is going to be devoid of magic?
If you're in space, in a ship, what ley line are you tapping into? Now, I'm a weird believer of there's cosmic fucking energy going around. We don't understand half the shit that happens within our universe, right? So when you start adding in fantasy magic thing, of course there's going to be flows of fucking particles and fucking beams of rays and stuff and like that in a space setting. I'll be annoyed if they don't at least try and at least insinuate that might be a little bit of a thing. Cause you've got the chaos wall and
nebula and stuff like that.
Stuff like that. But you're probably exactly right. The fact that he can happily survive without being tapped into magic because he is mostly artificial. The dark still feels like an inert metal. Yeah. So it's maybe going to make his magic more inert. We can even see in the picture, it's not like he's lost his ability to use magic because he's even got some weird swirly thingy in his hand. It's doing that. But as you say, is it because he's not directly tapped into any kind of magic? It's not actually about who his personality is. It's actually about the situation of, as a planeswalker, he hasn't got that contact to blue mana or black mana, and it's probably a confluence of both, of where the magic he's using is neutral and his current psychological situation is fairly neutral. The most neutral it's been ever since we've ever met him. He's not under any guise of authority.
No. He is the authority.
Exactly. But he's an authority that isn't necessarily doing anything particularly the question will be for me in this story is, do we find out why cruel is in that title? And again, is it active cruelty or is it passive cruelty? Is he the kind of person who's going to be sat there going, no, let the black hole eat everything. I want to see what happens. And that Ugin curiosity of being like, let the natural things of the world happen. That almost removal of any emotional stake. Is that what's then putting him into being? I can't. Every time I look at him, I see that he costs 3 mana. I'm like, wizard, you're fucking nuts. Treasures exist, you weirdos. So and even then, is there something to be said about the fact that at 3 mana, he's not some grand, expensive thing to bring out? It costs 7 or 8 mana to bring out Ugin because he's a big old powerful guy. Maybe Tezzeret's just a guy. He's just a dude. He's just just do artifacty stuff now. I guess that's
hasn't lost his spark.
No, he hasn't lost his spark, and I think it's a good thing. Could you imagine going to the edge of Eternities and then having a spark going and be like, well, fuck.
It's like running out of gas on the edge of the desert.
Are we going to see a character that has who's a legendary creature that has the broken spark emblem, and it's Angrath really, really, really fucking pissed off away from home.
Angrath livid.
Yeah, right. That would be peak meme territory.
Oh, Angrath must suffer.
Why the fuck wasn't he in Outlaws? Oh, because we didn't make it to have Minotaurs in it. Why not?
He's a cowboy. He's literally a cowboy.
He's from that plane. Fuck off. He's not from that plane.
His story, I keep forgetting about that.
So did Wizards.
His background is that he's from a plane that's essentially
I reckon they just gave up and went, we can't possibly make a story that will justify how much people love him, so we're not going to bother. We're just going to ruin it like we did with Sarkhan. But that's why it raised the question, because there are so many things that go into defining a planeswalker and the colours that they are or the colours that they're not and the colours that they change into, that it's, for me, a very bold narrative choice to make Tezzeret colourless. And without having any story implication, I think it's a perfect time to go, I fucking hope there is some, because otherwise they're just doing it for the sake of going, hey, isn't it bold that we made a colourless planeswalker because he does artifact stuff and artifacts are colourless?
Yeah.
Because for me, that's the laziest approach they could take to making his character colourless.
And also, they've not done it before.
Yeah, and for me, Khan works as colourless because he is not only artificial completely, even his personality isn't. As much as it is sentience, it's almost what's the word I'm looking for? Sterile.
Yeah.
Like his personality, all of his functions are going. All of his emotions are going through a computer that's telling him how it should be processed. Whereas Tezzeret's had a lot of emotion. He's a very emotional guy. He's had a lot of shit happen to him. For that also then to be like, nah, he's just colourless, mate. I'm like, surely going through all of this stuff shouldn't render him without character.
Yeah.
So I hope it informs a character instead of it being a betrayal of a character. Because I really hope they don't do it to yet another semi-villain that we've seen go through a bunch of changes just to be like, cool, character progression doesn't exist anymore.
I agree. Time will tell. I mean, by the time this episode comes out, maybe we'll have seen him in the story. So apologies if you've just listened to this knowing
you fucking
what the deal is. We're talking about this in the past. In fact, everything...
You're listening to this in the future.
Almost everything we say in life is already in the past by the time we say it.
Oh, that's true, because we hear it through the... Oh, you're clever.
Yeah. So think about that next time when you're trying to go to sleep.
Beautiful. If you are going to sleep to this existential crisis...
If you fall asleep to this podcast, go to therapy.
Wow.
But also, thank you. That's very
Yeah,
sweet.
really appreciate it. Thank you for being asleep whilst listening.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Instead of doing a final thoughts, I'm just going to ask you, like, very sum up. Where are you at Magic right now? You've been building a lot of decks recently.
Funny enough, you say that. I haven't actually. I've got a lot of things. I've been.
Okay.
Well, no, I had been, and then the most recent thing at the moment, I'm currently in a position of being like, cool. I'm kind of pausing, and I guess you're right that I'm right. I'm at the cusp of the wave of like I've been pushing it back and pushing it back and pushing it back because I haven't been able to play as much. I don't see the point of building, spending money, investing time because I've got other things to be fucking doing. If I'm not able to actively play with them, you know. So I kind of stopped for a fair while. The plan was to adapt all 4 of the murders of not murders of Karlov Manor, the fucking murders of Markov Manor. Karlov?
It was Karlov.
It was Karlov. I got it right the first time and it sounded so silly I regretted myself. But I wanted to convert all of those 4 because otherwise they just sat there not doing anything. And it was quite fun to be like, hey, let's maybe make a politic-y kind of deck. And I've got a few on the back burner. However, I have converted Braze into Sephiroth. Yes. I do have a Kefka deck that I'm slowly building. And then I'm going to probably make a Naya Terra Saga deck. Because...
See? Do you know what I mean? You and I are actually probably on the most diametrically opposed arcs of our Magic, especially for deck building careers, I think has ever been. Because not only are you on the kind of like riding the high of all this new stuff coming out, because it's Universes Beyond and it's Final Fantasy, and you love Final Fantasy, and you're also playing Final Fantasy 6, so the Kefka deck and the Terra decks.
That's
now
exactly
make more sense, right?
Yeah.
You're on this kind of high, whereas I'm not opposed because I'm not building. I have been quietly tinkering away, but I'm on the complete flip side of that, where I have not been building new decks, and instead, I've been taking so much joy in finding cards from like my own memory banks of like, I remember when this card came out and it was worth 20 quid, and so I've never thought about it buying it again. And now, because of Universes Beyond and all this new hotness, things like Torrential Gearhulk are like 3 quid.
Yeah, super cheap.
Whereas I remember when they were like fucking nut about their money. Or just things like that, or finding older cards to slot quietly into that deck that I'm like so for example, my Wernog and Hargild Blink artifact deck. All my decks have about 5 game plans, I've noticed now. It's a Blink artifact deck that uses lots of win cons like Tezzeret, Master of the Bridge to deal with like multiple tokens. I'm trying to refine that down into maybe do I want to kind of go really hard into the kind of Marionette Master, Marionette Apprentice route. Or maybe more stuff akin to that, right?
Kind of like Artifact Aristocrat.
A little bit. I mean, the Blink still has to be there and the tokens still have to be there, so that has to be the main crux. But am I diluting the game plan too much into make all these tokens and then I don't have anything to do with them? So I still want to kind of keep that going. Anyway, quietly putting like momentary Blink or like older cards which are like maybe quieter in their scope or quieter in like what their splashiness is, like one line of text, and it just does this one efficient thing, and putting that in, and that works. And it's so funny because I've really enjoyed our play group recently when we have played, because you guys all bringing in all this like crazy fucking like bazooka with like, you know, fur lining and a trinket on the top of it, and you're firing off
freaking sharks with laser beams.
And I'm sat there on the other side of it going like, oh, I wonder if I'll pull that 5 mana sorcery I put in there the other day. Like, oh, I took out Farewell for a Cataclysmic Gearhulk. Let's see if that happens. Yeah. It's fun. I know, that's where I am.
Yeah, I mean, the reskin of Braids to Sephiroth was just I there are certain decks I'm like, I don't need to touch it for years. I know it's still going to be fine. And my Mono Black deck, otherwise known as Concentrated Blackberry Juice, is just the pinnacle of all of the typical things you'd expect in black. Some kill spells, some sacrificey stuff, a few zombies. I'm going to drain you out. Yeah. You know, it's just graveyard.
It was a cool deck. I mean, those games were fun.
Yeah, and it works. Whereas
you guys bullied me out of the game when I had my Nyxia deck.
Yeah.
That's another deck, just very quickly, where I feel like it should win more than it does. And I think it's because it doesn't actually have the clearest win con. It's like
you're just really good at getting real scary.
It's 90% of a really scary deck, and the last 10% is how do I win?
Yeah, where am I getting over the top on? Yeah. What am I getting over the top through? Yeah, I guess it's difficult when you're doing loads of tricksy things, but ultimately it still boils down to I am an aggro deck. Most of the thing my deck's doing is to make 4/4 creatures. So it's like, well, what do I need to make my 4/4 creatures win the game?
Yeah,
and then that's maybe where you look at. Fucking hell, the sun just hit me in the eyes. That's the time where you think about maybe cheap versions of Overrun, where you just need to give all of your creatures trample. Like maybe you need to. I'm assuming Garruk's Uprising's in the deck.
There are other things similar to it.
Because that one makes sense, because obviously your creatures come in as 4/4s, they'll draw you the card, and then all your creatures can have trample, and it's an enchantment, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, the biggest thing for me, and the reason why I dialed back a lot on tinkering in decks, and I don't mind building new decks because that's the constant thing in your head of say, oh, I see the new card, and I want to, maybe like my Satsuki deck, I haven't really played it very much, it's just your typical enchantment, Selesnya bullshit, so maybe I convert that into the Terranaya deck so I can use more summons, but because I don't get to play as much, I don't see that kind of, oh, let me try this out, and that's going to be cool. Instead, it's just theory crafting new decks that I still then don't get to play, which is, I think, the thing that really keeps building healthy is the proof of concept. The building and the brewing is the theory, but you need the reality, you need the actual like hard evidence and the data, and that's where, you know, as you say, like the game coming out, like playing enough games in the Nixia to be like, maybe I need another way to win. And that's basically where it comes from. It's just noticing on in the games that you play, like, what does my deck do that I like, and what is it doing that I need to improve.
Well, especially as you guys keep blowing up all my Ghostly Prison Sphere of Safety.
Yeah, it turns out 2 Sphere of Safeties is, when you've got seven enchantments in play, isn't the funnest thing to play against.
I'm not hitting anyone. Yeah.
Yeah, you're unhittable. It's fine. You didn't win the game. It was okay.
No, it took 3 players to take me out. Yeah. Anyway, tell us what you think about colour shifting and planeswalkers and all that lovely jazz. A few of you have already hit us up on Bluesky because I put out the concept for this episode a little bit early to get people's thoughts. A lot of people are very upset that Chandra hasn't had other colours as well as Jace.
But I mean, the question would be, what other fucking colour would you give her?
I don't know.
Also, Jace he's had white.
Space Balerians had white.
Space Balerin.
Let us know via Bluesky. Let us know via email. Tell friends about this podcast. Tell enemies about this podcast.
Yeah.
Do you have an enemy that likes Magic the Gathering?
Yeah, tell them to listen as they fall to sleep, and our raucousness will keep them up.
Yeah. Oh, they'll enjoy it so much they'll fucking get a stress headache.
Oh yeah, migraine.
I don't want to make the new pitch about this podcast be Magic the Flavouring giving you a migraine. I don't know.
Giving you a migraine of happiness and intellect.
Thank you so much for listening. This has been Magic the Flavouring.
We'll see you soon.